Thank you. All right. So I've been mouthing off on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. My full name is my Twitter tag. I've been mouthing off on Twitter about blockchain for a while. And when I was invited to come and give a keynote here, I thought, okay, I have to put my money and my effort where my mouth is, and say something about blockchain in public and develop it a bit more. So today I'm going to give an anti-hype talk. Are there any blockchain enthusiasts in the room? Oh, that's a good fair number. Please ask questions. I think we're doing them at the end in principle, but
I'll be happy to just comment and see if you have any questions.
all right, I'm happy to be interrupted. A conversation is always much better than a monologue, right? So I'm looking at a couple of scenarios where blockchain is the wrong answer. Okay, you will find that I'm coming up with so many scenarios that I'm leaving you a fairly small space in which blockchain may be the right answer. But according to the world at the moment, blockchain is the answer to everything, and I don't think it is. Right? So a 1-minute introduction to what blockchain actually is. What is a blockchain? Well, a blockchain is a data structure where you can only add information, you can never remove it. That's the most essential part of it, right? And the things that you typically add to it are typically transactions. They're not just random bits of data, but they're transactions like we're adding something to a database, or someone's giving some money to someone, and it originated in the Bitcoin world, where the transaction is indeed some money being passed from one person to another. Okay. The idea is that it's decentralized, because the assumption that lies behind it is that you can't actually trust anybody, or you shouldn't have to trust anybody. So because of that, nobody can be in control of the information of the information that is stored on the blockchain, and as a consequence, everybody needs to have that information. Right? In dependability, we build in redundancy. So Google, for example, for their search, to support their search engine, has lots and lots of copies of their index of the entire web, because some of them are in different places in the world. You might get served by the one that's nearest to you, and some of that is that if one of these falls over, the whole Google search service doesn't fall over. Yeah? Standard trick. If something is important, you need to keep multiple copies of it in order to make sure that if one copy breaks down, not all of them do. Blockchain takes this to an extreme. You make sure that everybody's got a copy of it, right? But as soon as you introduce redundancy, you immediately get the problem of consistency. Now, if we're looking at Google search engines and their view of the web, they are not too worried about consistency, in the sense that it is approximate information anyway, and if it gets updated in one place, one version of the Google index of the World Wide Web may be a little bit out of sync with another one. But if you're looking at something that stores essential information like who currently holds all Bitcoins in the world, then you need a very strong version of consistency, right? And blockchain has a thing called the consensus algorithm, proof of work and all that, to make sure that everybody's got a copy of the blockchain, and everybody's copy is consistent with everybody else's. And the only reasonable way of doing that is to do that incrementally, because the blockchain grows. It only grows and grows. So you can't keep checking the full copies of it. What you have to do is to control the addition of new information to it. Okay. And the block in the blockchain is actually completely irrelevant at a conceptual level. It is a trick. It is a way of making things slightly more efficient in some sense. Namely, you don't just create a new block and a new link for every item that you add, but you collect these items and you put those in a block, and then you add them collectively. That is both an efficiency gain and something that introduces its own sort of administrative overhead, right? And if you have this database that's never allowed to change, you need to make sure that you can detect it when it has been changed. And the technology for that has been around for about 40 years. Things called a Merkle tree. It's invented by the cryptographer Merkle, and it basically links the blocks in the chain not through a direct pointer, but through a hash of all the previous information. So if you carry a hash of all the previous information, or some way of most of the previous information around all the time, then you can immediately see when everything before you has changed. So the attempts to tamper with it get detected that way. Right. So my talk today is about, for what sort of applications is this a bad idea? Because the blockchain, the typical blockchain enthusiasm goes, blockchain is different, brilliant, has these abstract properties, and we should use it for this application because it needs those abstract properties. And that's usually where it ends. That's the point where the venture money comes in and the business spins off, and yeah, I don't hear much after that usually. So where do I come from? Well, I come from cryptography. I know a little bit about cryptography. For a computer scientist, I probably know a lot about data protection. I'm also just an old computer scientist. I've been working in... I went to university 35 years ago to study computer science because I don't know what else I was going to do, and I'm still there. Yeah? So I've seen stuff, and I'm cynical with age, I guess. And one of the areas I've also looked at is distributed systems, which gives you a bit of this here, the whole narrative of duplicating information and consistency in particular. So let me give you about 5 examples of information that we should not be storing on the blockchain. Okay, my first category of information is short-term information, whether it has value or not. Yeah, so the intermediate score of the game last night, when England were in the lead after about 5 minutes until a little bit before the end of regular time, it was England 0, Croatia 1, England 1, Croatia 0. But that's transient information. Yeah, it's not worth keeping this information. Do we really want to give the whole world a copy of this that it needs to keep forever on the blockchain? Probably not. Yeah, for the extreme enthusiasts among us, we can probably look it up on some FIFA webpage or on the Wikipedia page to remember. Yeah, even though they were kicked out, which is maybe the important bit of information. Sorry, people. Yeah, they were briefly in the lead. All right. And remember, the point with it is it's information that is of short-term value, mostly. Okay. Now, the next thing that we definitely don't want to put on the blockchain is information that has a big value over a long time. Why not? Okay, this is where the crypto side of things comes in for me. Yeah, the blockchain is open. Everybody can have a copy, so everybody can see anything that's on it. So what do we do to do that? Well, we protect it. Yeah, we protect it with cryptography. Having an open data structure. Having an open data structure should be fine. And I'm saying. I'm arguing against my discipline by saying, you shouldn't put public information, valuable information on open data structure. You're not showing enough trust in cryptography there, are you? Yeah, the Kerckhoff principle is an ancient principle of cryptography, which basically says you shouldn't do security through obscurity. Yeah, so the idea is that the network is inherently unsafe, but you can do cryptography that's strong enough that you can put anything on there. Yeah, it's not that you can't hide information anywhere if it's valuable enough. It will be transferred at some point, so you just need to make sure you can encrypt it all the way. So maybe I'm arguing against my field there, but on the other hand, crypto is going to break, right? P will probably not equal NP at any point in the near future or in the far future. People have been trying that for hard enough, but there is a serious chance that whatever encryption that we use now to put data on the blockchain will be broken in the future, right? It could be because it could be cryptanalysis, which really means that we find out later that the crypto was broken all along. Yeah, it's just taken a lot more mathematical analysis and many more years to find out that it was never really good. The thing that keeps modern crypto alive is the idea that our cryptographic methods the strength of them depends on the length of the key. Yeah? The strength of RSA is that if we have an RSA key, if it was safe 20 years ago to use an RSA key of maybe 128 bits, and Moore's law means that computing power doubles every 18 months, then that means that I've done the computations for students on a board once, but it means that you need to add a bit to the key every couple of years or something along those lines. So where we're advising people to use 2048-bit keys on RSA now, that's probably all right. But the blockchain will be there forever, right? So eventually. The Moore's law will probably catch up. And then the key we said RSA was safe, yes, and at this point in the future RSA was safe with a very long key, but it was unfortunately encrypted with the keys that we're using now. This is the one hype that I've got on my slides that's possibly worse than blockchain. Some crypto will get broken when we get real quantum computers, but we're not getting real quantum computers really fast. And just as a point of consistency, my DNA, yeah, if I had a digital copy of my DNA, I would not send that encrypted over the internet at this point in time anyway. Yeah, no matter how strongly encrypted it might be, but for the same sort of reasons, my DNA is long-term valuable. In the sense that I would be mad to give my DNA away to 23andMe or Ancestry, or they're teamed up now anyway, because I am giving away the genetic information of me and all my descendants until eternity. I think Ancestry and 23andMe between them have many millions of DNA records of people across the world. This is going to be fun. But okay. Next category of data that I think we shouldn't put on the blockchain. That's data that's sensitive to fraud of some kind. I'm getting more controversial here. Some of the interesting use cases of blockchain are where people say, well, I want to be absolutely sure that my quinoa or whatever, whichever way you pronounce that, is completely organic and completely fairly traded. Yeah, and the way I'm doing that is I have my producer stick a record on the blockchain to say that this was all kosher to start with, and that record is immutable. So everybody will know forever that when it moves to the entire production chain, when it arrives in the shop, that it had a good provenance, and that's fine. And then people can't, because it's immutable, people can't actually change it. So But unfortunately, if it was profitable for people to be lying about this by putting information in databases, and you can't by changing databases, then it's also profitable to put it in the blockchain to make sure that at the point where it goes into the blockchain, the information is wrong, right? But unfortunately, if this is sensitive to fraud, it means people will try fraud. Yeah? And if fraud is a potential, then there should be somebody looking whether fraud has taken place, and if fraud is discovered, they should be correcting the information. But this is where blockchain drops out, right? Because we only have the information that was recorded initially. We have no way of fixing it, because the blockchain is immutable. So, shouldn't do this. There's a slight proviso here, which is that I'm being a little bit unfair on blockchain, in the sense that blockchain is not itself a database. Blockchain is a chain of transactions. So the chain of transactions determines the current state of the database. You can evaluate all the transactions from the beginning of time till now, and that constitutes a database of some sort. And that also means that you can have deletions and additions. So that database that's sort of conceptually represented by the blockchain can be changed. So you can actually delete a record. And that's a thought that will come back. Maybe if that's your model, if you're happy to have on the blockchain the fact that this bit of data, the provenance of this bit of food was recorded in one way first, and then we deleted that and replaced it by another, and that's all through transactions. If that's okay to have on there, then yes, you can do it on a blockchain. However, there's an efficiency cost in that you have the entire history of all transactions there instead of the database itself, which may be different in size, massively different in size. I'll come to size at a later point. Okay. This is the one where I've spent most time thinking about, and the one that's most controversial out there, maybe. But I think my answers here are I'm pretty convinced of my answers on this one, and this is the big thing that we really shouldn't do. So we shouldn't put personal data on the blockchain, right? Why not? Well. We can start from a legalistic view, right? There's law and there's ethics and there's right. Law is only a temporary encoding of what society at one point in time thinks is right or wrong, and the more complex and abstract the law, the further it may be away from what society really wants. Yeah, GDPR may just be something that has been slipped on us by the EU, by technocrats or data protection lawyer nerds or whatever, and it may be completely the right thing. It may be ruining innovation for forever, and we may come to regret it. We may, yeah, but I personally I don't. But let's start from that. Okay, so the GDPR says, among a few other things, that data subjects, so the people who the data is about, who the personal data is about, have rights that they should be able to exercise. So which rights are not possible to use to apply on the blockchain? Well, the obvious one is the right to correction, right? If someone has personal data about you and it's wrong, which can happen. Yeah, this is one of the stronger arguments against the "I've got nothing to hide" argument against privacy. Yeah, just wait and see what happens if people behave badly against you on the basis of low quality, incorrect data. But if it's on the blockchain, it can never be fixed. Yeah, so you can't. The GDPR says if information is wrong, the data controller is forced to change it. Data has to be accurate as a principle, and they can't do that. Another one, the right to erasure. This one is somewhat known as the right to be forgotten. Okay, the right to be forgotten in the sort of limited sense, the Google right to be forgotten story is one that's useful, illustrative in this context. That was the case of Mr. Costeja in Spain, who went bankrupt or very close to it, and then that was in newspapers, and what came up first on Google searches for him was the fact that he had been bankrupt or nearly bankrupt 15 years ago, and he said that's no longer relevant, that shouldn't come up as the first entry when you search for me, and eventually on the basis of the legislation that went before the GDPR, he got his way. He did become famous in the world. I even know his name, and I know that he's been bankrupt, so he sacrificed a bit of privacy in order to give privacy to the world, or to Europe. And that still goes, so you can still apply to Google and say, I think if you search for my name, that this and this entry really shouldn't be coming up or shouldn't be coming up high. Yeah, the strong operative cases of that is some people who were witnesses or coincidentally involved with high-profile crime cases where they didn't want the world to be reminded every time they search for this person that they actually happened to be in the area when something else happened. That wasn't relevant for their life, and now the lesson that we've taken from that is newspapers didn't like this right to be forgotten. Newspapers said we're being censored. Yeah, this article of ours doesn't come up anymore if you search for a particular person's name. And newspapers started to create lists of articles that had been censored. These lists, some of those were again found by European and national courts to be in breach of the spirit of the entire right to be forgotten thing. Yeah, because actually, if people searched for a particular person, instead of finding the page that had been removed, they found the newspaper's list of removed pages, which was and I say the page that had been removed, I need to say the page that had been delinked from that particular search outcome. Yeah, so people were subverting it like that. But the relevant point is the fact that this information, if you can find that this information existed at one point, that can breach privacy as much as the fact that the information was there, if the reference is clear enough. Yeah? But that's not the real right to erasure. The real right to erasure in the GDPR is much wider than that. And very crucially, in the GDPR, personal data needs to be processed on the basis of some legitimate basis, and one of the possible bases, not the only one if you don't believe the hype on that, one of the possible ones is consent. And consent is a terrible basis for legal processing from perspective of data processor, data controller. Why? Because people can withdraw consent. If you're processing the data on the basis of consent, you put yourself immediately in a position where the people can say, I now withdraw my consent, and as a consequence, you need to stop processing my data on the spot. That's the right. That's the real right to erasure. So, if we can't erase someone's data from the blockchain, a consequence we can't use. If we were to put personal data on the blockchain, consent should never be the legal basis for it. That sounds counterintuitive, but it's because we can't tolerate consent being withdrawn. Okay? So the only thing that I can imagine that would work as a legal basis there, if you're not a government organization, is something like a contract. Right? A contract, so you're doing the data processing on the basis of some sort of contract which relates to the purpose, and then you might have your data subject sign away the right to exercise the right to correction and erasure. I'm not sure that's even possible. I'm not sure whether you can actually sign away rights that you have. But the essential bit is that as far as the GDPR allows you to sign away rights and to sign up to multiple things in the contract, that it wants you to be granular about that, and it only wants you to grant things that are essential to the processing, and it's very unlikely the fact that the blockchain is a clunky data structure that doesn't work for this purpose is viewed as being relevant to whatever purpose you're doing personal data processing on the blockchain for. So, probably not. And then you can get into stupid legal arguments, right? So the data controller is the person who decides the purpose of the processing and who is in control of the data. Who is the data controller? Is it the organization that set up the blockchain for this particular processing purpose? Or is it everybody who can submit a candidate transaction for inclusion on the blockchain? That's funny, isn't it? Or then you end up in the strange situation that yes, it's personal data, but maybe the person who actually submits the transaction for including on the blockchain, for example, the use case where we say, okay, we should all be putting our personal medical data on the blockchain so we can share it with whoever we like. Now, that's a very common one in the health sector. But we're putting it on there, and maybe we're putting it on in an encrypted way and in a way that nobody else can read it. We only have the key, only us have the key, unless we share it. So yes, it's a bit of an odd situation. Yeah. So people say, oh, the blockchain proves GDPR is out of date. Well, I think this is probably the only dimension, and I think it's a bit of a technical one, and it's hypothetical, really, because if we go back to the essence of GDPR and data protection and all the law that sits across data protection in the whole world, data protection basically says, and privacy says, they shouldn't be processing your data any longer than that it's relevant. Yeah? They shouldn't have data, and processing includes storing. So never mind the precise detail of controllers and rights to erasure. Once your data becomes irrelevant, and that happens to all data at some point, it should be removed, and it can't. Yeah, so never put medical information on the blockchain. Never put banking transactions on the blockchain unless they're business to business, because they're personal data. Yeah, shame for the banks, but at a stretch, no, let's skip this. But then, of course, let me skip this as well. Let me skip to the answer that you get when you say, oh, but you shouldn't put personal data on the blockchain. No, we're not putting personal data on the blockchain. That would be stupid, right? Because you can't change it. No, we're putting a pointer to the personal data on the blockchain. We're storing the personal data somewhere else where we can exercise all the GDPR rights and things like that. And all that you find on the blockchain is an address of where the information can be found. Yeah, yeah, that's great. So the situation, roughly speaking, that you end up with is something like that. It's not really blockchain, is it? It's not really decentralized because there's this trusted frog in the middle. By the way, my lesson of working with computers for many years is that if you can't draw on paper, you can't draw with a computer either. So you might as well try. So you end up with you're supposed to be decentralized, but you've got this central database that everybody's pointing to. Yeah, you've got somebody who's in control of that central database. So the whole blockchain business is out of the window. Let me skip that and give the last controversial non-use case for blockchain. Any successful application shouldn't be on the blockchain. Okay? Let's say that there are n nodes in the blockchain world, yeah, and participants to the scheme. And every time unit we perform m transactions. Now, once someone comes up with a transaction, that needs to be broadcast. So that's on the order of the number of n communications, if you do it efficiently. Everybody needs to receive it. Yeah, broadcasting exists in some media, but not in the media. So at some level in network stack, these are individual messages arriving at everybody. Whereas in a centralized world, bringing in a candidate transaction means just you send it to the central coordinator. Yeah, and maybe somebody else will look up the result of it later, and maybe they won't. That's what the dotted lines on the picture mean. And then eventually a new block gets created, and again that needs to arrive at all n participants. And then proof of work needs to be done. I'm not going to talk about proof of work. I'm not talking about the rainforest ecology global warming today. But effectively, the number of communications you get per time unit is on the order of the product of the number of transactions per time unit and the number of participants of the network. Yeah? And the amount of storage, because everybody needs to keep a copy of the blockchain, is the same number times the total time elapsed since the start of the universe, of the blockchain universe. So we're running out of storage space. You can't stop time, so you can't have successful applications that either generate lots of transactions or generate lots of participants or both, right? So maybe land registry is a good use case in this case because you've got relatively few transactions. Micropayments, well, the clue is in the word micro, right? Micropayments means that you're going to have lots of them. Yes, if I want my salary to be paid by somebody producing micropayments, it's going to have to be a fair number of them. So micropayments and anything to do with Bitcoin, Bitcoin has already crashed, right? Clogged up in terms, it drops transactions at the moment. So micropayments don't work. I've got bad news for you. The Internet of Things doesn't work on the blockchain either, because the Internet of Things is about making sure that there's more internet-connected devices than there are people in the universe times a factor. Yeah, so we don't want our very fancy computers to hold the whole entire blockchain of that, let alone have even dreaming of a tiny IoT device with a limited memory having to store a blockchain or part of a blockchain. So that's just a few. Okay, I've not talked about blockchain having to respond within realistic timeframes, because at the moment it doesn't, but maybe you can actually build a blockchain that does. I've not talked much about cryptocurrencies, and I've not talked about consensus mechanisms that are a little bit imperfect. Right? I've said a consensus mechanism makes sure that everybody agrees, but in any sort of system you can actually, well, in most consensus algorithms, including the Bitcoin blockchain one, you can actually mount an attack against it if you have enough people on your side. And the word is that the Bitcoin miners are gathering in pools, which between them have so much of the mining power that they can actually do that at the moment already if only a couple of these pools collaborated. So yeah, just a few of those. So that I'll leave it at that and hope that you're convinced that there are some use cases left. Thank you.